Welcome to another edition of It's the Story That Matters. I am the man in a pink suit, Ezekiel Drews, festival director for MIFA, as well as the host of It's the Story That Matters. I have William Rush that is on the call with us today, and we'll be going through with our director interview series here. And William, it's nice to meet you. Do you go by Bill, I'm assuming?
Yeah, please call me Bill. Absolutely.
All right, thanks, Bill. Well, first of all, let's kind of get right into it. So, I'm out of Wisconsin, and I'm probably one of those people that might not be as familiar. Obviously, I got to see your film Immersion, so I'm excited to talk with you about that today. But tell me a bit about you, your film's production studio, and maybe how long have you been doing filmmaking?
Not terribly long. I'm originally from New York, and I'm outside Philadelphia now. And I'm to this day an attorney, but always loved film and stuff like that, and was obsessively, I would say, love film. Um, when lockdown happened, and I was finally with a partner who was willing to watch Eraserhead and enjoy it. You know what you have, and then just discussing movies and my passion about it. She pointed out how passionate I was, and knew of Stephen King's Dollar Baby program, and says, just what, pitch him an idea. And I did, and it takes a few months to get back, but it was, I think, like 36 hours. It's like, you got it, go make it. And I'm like, well, now I have to.
Yeah.
And so we made one for the road, and then I'm like, you know what, you learn how to direct by doing it in a lot of respects, and I'm like, I can do better, and was determined to. So I wrote and shot Group, and wrote and shot Immersion right after that. So my film career is about 2 years old total, with two features, and the short, about 45 minutes, but even so, and it's kind of gone from there.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you've got your history as I think I read as I was doing some research on you. You've been a trial attorney for about 2 decades. So how is your legal profession? How has that kind of shaped your influenced you in terms of your approach to filmmaking, especially for preparation, attention to detail? Because you got to be on that when you're a lawyer.
Yeah, well, you should be. I mean, there are there are those of us that aren't. Yeah, no, it is a direct corollary, really. My filmmaking approach is very similar to my trial approach, because you have this event that happens, and over years it accumulates all this information and evidence that no matter how long it takes, no matter how many hundreds of thousands of pages you have, documents and hours and hours and hours and hours of interviews, you have to condense it down into the story you need to tell, sometimes in as little as a day, to an audience of 12, 13, if you count the judge, and get them to believe your story as you're presenting it. And that really has been the approach to filmmaking. It's meticulous planning and preparation, so that we can complete the film, everybody fully prepared, variables factored in, as quickly as possible. And then, truthfully, post-production actually always takes the longest with
Hmm.
us. That's just how it goes. But as far as on set, like, these actors are ready to go. I know what the shot I want is, but if weather is not cooperating, or if a jumbo jet flies over, whatever the case may be, that can mess you up, and there's always something, or an actor gets sick, or has to be, like, we're ready for that contingency, the following contingency. What if we can't shoot this shot at all? Is there an alternate location? Is there an alternate way? Is there another way to narratively make everything make sense? That really happened on Immersion. I mean, the script called for sun and a lot of outdoors, and it rained the entire time, except for one brief day. And during that brief day, we had the Canadian wildfires, which you would think would make for an interesting lighting effect,
Right.
but didn't. But did make for unhealthy breathing. So we had to be very cognizant and safe about things like that. So yeah, the two definitely go hand in hand in my trial and legal experience. Very much guide how I at least approach the aspect of getting the film completed, getting it done. By no means the artistic part of it. That's just separate. That's my escape hatch from law. But in terms of compartmentalization and planning, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I'm with you in terms to when it comes to like weather unpredictability or Canadian wildfires. When we shot our first feature, the very first day of filming, there was a blizzard that happened literally the night before, and it was supposed to be clear weather for a lot of the outside shots. And so we just kind of had to frame everything in order to just make it work, because we had a cast of about 48 people that showed up that day. So it's pretty crazy. So I'm with you. That's
Blizzard, aka a continuity nightmare.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
All you do is
God,
just
yeah.
frame it up. Just don't get the snow in the shot.
Good luck. No, it's funny because One for the Road, we wanted snow, and we literally, I mean, we researched, used, the Farmer's Almanac and meteorological surveys, and found the one place where it always snowed at a specific time every year. And we got there, and the snow didn't hit. It hit every area around us, shut things down. But in our little area, no. So I needed snow, and it didn't happen. So I would have traded you at least on that day.
Yeah, no, for sure. I read that your first theatrical experience was watching E.T. Uh, how did that kind of shape things for you from a passionate, looking at film?
Oh, immensely. For one thing, and what Spielberg did brilliantly is it's shot entirely from Elliot's perspective. If you watch it again, we're at his height level the entire time. So I
Hmm.
think as far as a first movie-going experience for a child, and it was a second run. I think it was released in 1982. I would never remembered it. But maybe around the time I was like 5 years old, they reran it with I think either Short Circuit or Back to the Future. I fell asleep during the second one, but it was absolutely spectacular. It felt magical, I guess.
Yeah.
This escapism, and then of course, back in the olden days, you waited years before there was like the opportunity to purchase a VHS
Hmm.
of ET. So it was years before I got to see it again, but the magic was still there, and I was closer to Elliot's age, and it was a real fantastic experience then, still is now. And then of course, as you go on and learn about cinema and like why does that shot work that way, and why is this particular scene magical? Why is this more exciting than something else? And you discover this film Jaws after that, and then you
Hmm.
start to realize,
Hmm.
wait, the same person made both of these. So then, you flash forward for a few years when you have a little bit of sophistication and you're like, and now he's making Jurassic Park. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
holy okay, well, yeah, this is a master of a craft that's eliciting emotions from me, whatever emotions he wants to, he's got. And that's the talent into conveying the story. And for our first feature, which was group, people are in a group therapy setting. And that's being distributed by Counterspell, by the way, distribution. I should point that out so I don't get shot. And For that movie, I want to do the same thing, which is the entire film, except for a couple of very key scenes toward the end. They're shot as if you're sitting at one of the chairs in the room by design, and that was obviously influenced by Spielberg's use of perspective for E.T.
Hmm.
So it still goes with me, to this day. And I've met many, many, many awesome celebrities. I've never had a reaction. I swear to God, if I met Dee Wallace or Drew Barrymore, that I would have the react. Like it would probably Peter Coyote too. Like that's how ingrained the film is. So absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Were you fortunate or unfortunate enough to play the ET video game when it came out?
I absolutely was. And the funny thing is, if anybody's listening and you want me to describe it, I can't. It's like a fever dream. All I can say is ET looking block is wandering around the desert looking block and consistently falling into holes. That's
Yeah.
all I got. That's my entire memory of the game.
It
And that,
reminds me of there was the Who Framed Roger Rabbit video game, which was also to me, I remember as a child, but just again a fever dream. Just oh my gosh, where they come up with these gameplay that had almost nothing to do with the movies.
oh no, and of course there's that documentary about where they supposedly trashed all the ET games. I think it was the ET games, and they
I believe
actually
it.
proved it was true, and they dug them up in a landfill somewhere in the desert out west. They really were there, which is crazy. I think it was the ET game.
Yeah,
So
I choose to believe it. So, so you talked about Spielberg. I know there's another director I remember reading that had pretty big inspiration. I'm going to butcher his name here, Michael Haneke.
oh,
Um,
Haneke.
Haneke. So tell me about him and your admiration for him, how that's influenced you too.
Well, the funny thing about talking about Spielberg is I haven't made anything resembling a Spielberg movie because there's tone and hope. But Haneke is very similar in terms of he puts this visceral story at you. You pick up at point A and you end at point B, um, and where he starts, that's what you get. There's not
Yeah,
background. These are the characters, you're meeting them, and he sucks you in with that, and then he does about the darkest films imaginable. Funny Games, of course, I still think it's Funny Games is the scariest film I've ever seen, and I love horror films, and I'm not bothered by things, but Funny Games got me. He shot The Piano Teacher, which is really dark with Isabelle Huppert. An Austrian director, but he's made many French films, and shoots in French. The Cachet is a fantastic one. But to give you like some idea of his style, there's a film called The White Ribbon, which takes place in just pre-Nazi occupation Germany, and it starts with a long shot of a man tripped up, his horse tripping because somebody has strung a wire. And that is the catalyst of why did somebody string this wire and what's going on in this town. Spoiler alert, you're never going to find out who strung that wire or why. He's not going to give you that. He's
yeah.
just going to give you the self-destruction and the horrors that go on behind closed doors and everything. Everything's shot very realistically. And so his style is what I love the best because it's just like you're engrossed in whatever he does. Another movie where an old man is trying to convince his young granddaughter to kill him the entire film, and that's one of his funnier ones. It's called Happy End. I recommend his entire filmography to absolutely anybody, and just the fearlessness and just like, this is what we're doing, this is what the film is, and now you're sucked in, and you really can't help but be sucked in. It's a very like a John Cassavetes type thing where you're meant to be made uncomfortable and can't turn away from it. That's Haneke, and I love him. I love that he can do that.
Very nice, very cool. Well, thank you. I'll have to check out some of those films. You mentioned before, so you've completed, a couple different films that you've talked about here. So you completed One for the Road, you completed Group, Immersion. So I think if I saw, so Group and Immersion were completed both 2023, and I know you've been kind of going through the circuit and stuff with both those films. The process behind those, and when I look on your website, you're not looking for a cookie cutter about fitting into like one genre. You're kind of trying to make things be different. So tell me the difference, because I haven't seen Group, but I've seen Immersion. So what's the difference in terms of the creative process, and then how are these films really differing from each other? Because you kind of hinted a little bit about what Group's about. I've seen Immersion. We'll talk about Immersion a little bit more here, but I just want to kind of get some insight from you about how you approach those films.
Sure. Well, Group, came out with the idea. There were, I'm sure you have the friends too, where like you'll see somebody post something on Facebook, God forbid, or Instagram, and it's this like lovely, the happiest life imaginable. Then you run into
Mhm.
that person 20 minutes and they're miserable. And it's like, huh, but it's a presentation. I get that. And it's like, how far would that extend? Would it extend to group therapy? Would people who actually need to get better kind of gloss over the obviously negative or troubling reasons they're there? And to what degree? And then to what degree do the other people in the room care? And it devolves from there. And there are conflicts within the room, of course. It's been called a drama. It's been called an art film. It's been called horror thriller many
Mhm.
times over. And so it's kind of up for anybody to figure out what it is. It depends on which section you watch, I guess. But I certainly think it's a horror film once you've gotten to the end. And it is that thing where with these people in real time for, about 2 hours as they're going around and sharing their situation. And then it ends the way it ends, which I won't spoil. And you're left the audience is kind of jarred and left sitting there like, what happened? Which is definitely similar to the Haneke idea. It's obvious, the
Mhm.
obvious influence. There's no supernatural element at all. It's alarmingly realistic with a very mild score, like a very non-intrusive, barely there, subtle score. Immersion, on the other hand, is more of a traditional horror. It's arguably supernatural, I think.
Mhm.
And
Oh
you know
yeah.
that.
Arguably supernatural. I think that hits it completely on the head is that it's supernatural. Actually, when I was watching it, I got to tell you, I kind of got vibes at first that it was going to be supernatural, and then I thought you were just going full-blown science fiction with it, and then it janked us right back into supernatural kind of horror. And so I didn't know what to expect. And yeah, since we're talking about it now, obviously, so there's a big driver of some of the plot about not being able to understand. Because obviously, so when I was watching it, I'm so deaf, I have to watch with closed captioning. But when I was watching, I was like, there's no closed captioning for this part. So there are scenes where you're like, I have no idea what this person is saying. And I think that's the point of what you were trying to get is that you can't, there's no cheat code to get to understand. And it's kind of revealed like what they're, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it's revealed really late in the film about what they're actually saying. And I had to whip out Google Translate. And I was like, oh, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, oh man, okay. Makes more sense now because I was like, yeah, she's trying to understand like the body language and all this stuff. And I gotta hand it to you. Like it's something that definitely non-traditional, where people just they kind of get fixated on, you know, seeing what people are saying instead of really looking at their posture, looking at how they're delivering that. So you and I, if we were speaking two different languages, we could probably motion and do other things to kind of express our ideas. And I think that, as a society, we get away from wanting to understand the body posture and how people are saying things. And we try to pick up, just from just what they're saying, like in a written word or something, but there's so much more to that communication style. And I think, can you kind of shed some light for me as well? What made you choose to have that as because to me that seemed like it was a big theme about, disruptive communication and having to figure out how to communicate because especially there's some characters like the son and the girlfriend and stuff like that where you have to pay attention because it's a little subtle, but if you're looking into it, you can see that the way that they're talking and stuff is it's beyond the words. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, the one of my big things, and I've gotten frustrated many times, is you see like a trope used over and over again. And if you're talking about where there's like a supernatural presence or a haunted house or whatever the case may be, it's usually a kid or the wife, and then a husband or parents just don't believe them, dismiss it totally. Things happen, and then for some reason, every haunting or whatever you have, it's an American ghost that's similar enough to you and talks eventually, or they're menacing or whatever the case may be. But it if there's an afterlife and everything, that it stands to reason with all the languages on earth that you might run into one of these people and they can't. So the overriding theme is my strong belief that women are much better at picking up on body language and body cues and reading what's going on. And so I wanted to express that. And I thought about subtitling it, but only briefly. I was against it. Then people were pushing you should. And then I'm like, no, I'm firmly against subtitling this because then the audience is ahead of the character. So we're trying to figure out around the same time she is what's happening, but it's about women trusting their instincts and trusting their surroundings and reading a situation and acting realistically in this case, instead of having this the quote unquote skeptics say, no, I don't believe any of this nonsense. She's like, I believe it, but this is what I feel it is. And that happens to be also what I feel it would be in real life. It's just my personal opinion. But she tries to help in the way she can help. And they're a team. They have a good sisterly bond the entire time. And the moment the danger is there, she doesn't ignore it, because that can be extremely to your detriment in reality. She absolutely is proactive in the circumstances. And yeah, what you said, it's exactly that. There's listening and there's hearing, and people tend to do one or the other or half of one. But to sit and have a true conversation, and going even back to trial attorney, I never like picking a jury by myself because there's questions you have to read, and I can't see how the jurors are reacting to the questions. So I always have somebody there to read the questions I've prepared so that I can study the jury's body language and figure out, is it somebody that's pissed off they got chosen to be there? Is this somebody that clearly looks like they hate, an insurance company, or they don't think somebody should be paid for a car accident, should suck it up? Is it that, or in a criminal case, is it somebody that just has, this person's guilty? They have the word defendant. They were arrested. They're definitely guilty. That kind of look. So to me, it's very important to observe all parts of communication, and 90% of communication isn't verbal. And I think Renata Fashti, the actor, does a tremendous job. And the reason I wanted her to do this as well is because, she speaks with an accent. She's been in both my other films and does this fantastic job. But I know there's at least a segment of the population, of the audience, that will somewhat dismiss the ability because it's behind an accent. The same type of people that won't watch a subtitled movie. Because no, just dub it. It's like, that ruins it for me. I mean, the
Yeah.
dub it, I can't do it. Like, I need to know what the language, there's a purpose to the words chosen, and I'd rather read them to hear them dubbed, and it looks better when they're not dubbed.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that is what I was trying to
you're
go
talking
for.
to an anime nerd here. So, and I usually just listen to the original Japanese. So I'm used to reading subtitles. So I think that helps. Anytime that I got to listen to somebody that's talking a foreign accent, if there's subtitles and stuff, I don't mind reading them because I do that all the time anyways.
Yeah, you get it. And yeah, speaking to that, I waited until that Steelbook Akira was released because I was not going to watch it with English just overdubbing. I wanted the Japanese and I wanted the subtitles, and I do not regret that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. In previous interviews, you've mentioned the importance of capturing the best performances. So that can be because you might have a good shot, necessarily, but if the performance is off, it'll ruin that shot anyways, and you're not going to use it. So, what are some techniques or approaches that you've used in order to help with when you've been directing and stuff that you pull some performance out of your actors or actresses?
The first thing I do is the set atmosphere is very relaxed. I always tell somebody the moment you're cast, it's like, you've been cast. So I've written the character's gone, you've been cast, it's yours. So you possess it, bring it to life. If there's a backstory, if there's a thought that makes sense, go with your instinct. So there's a comfort and confidence, I think, that goes in there. And anytime somebody's struggling, my main, trick to that is just to not address what's happening in the room at all, to not address what might be quote unquote wrong with the performance. Um, you know, in Immersion, Chase, the actor, he's like a nephew to me. So I know his parents very well, and he had long hair in the beginning.
And
And
then you
and I said, I just walked up to him when he was like messing up. I think it was his first, you know, scene in the movie, and young, nervous. So I said, "Hey, your parents told me I can cut your hair. So we're definitely cutting your hair. I'm adding it in that we're cutting your hair on camera tomorrow." And he's like, "Serious?" And then I'm like, "Okay, let's reset." And then he's sitting there thinking about, is he really going to cut my, and knowing his uncle, yeah, I'm definitely going to have his haircut.
yeah.
And that was where his thoughts were. The scene comes out. So it's anything to do to relax. It's kind of like if they're thinking about acting, they're going to be looking like they're thinking about acting.
Yeah.
Whereas if they're not, they're not. It's one of those things, kind of like if you're struggling writing and then you start trying to play like a complicated song on guitar, it opens up a different part of your brain, and whatever little blockage you had doing that, it will, a lot of times it'll open up.
Mhm.
Or you go for a run, or you listen to an audiobook when you're struggling with something, and it will come because if you focus that other part of your brain. And I try to do that with the actors in a confident way, a joke, something like that. There's no need to have them walk through a door 100 times. They were torturing like Kubrick, and I'm not knocking Kubrick's work; it's amazing. But I think his methods went a little too far. I don't think he cared about his actors particularly, and I love them. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a family atmosphere, and everybody is also super encouraging. Um, it's usually the actor themselves. It's like, let me get another one. And I'm also a big fan of continuing to roll the cameras. We always do multi-coverage of everything, and actually be like taking it again, and then yeah, you can at just boom, you cut to camera two, and we have that continuity so that the tone and the delivery all stays the same. But it's never going to be a big deal when somebody messes up a take. It's not going to be. You could do it again. It's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Speaking of Kubrick, by the way, I heard that they hired him to film the original moon landing since
Mm.
it was fake and everything, but he
Oh yeah.
insisted on doing it on location.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
if there's anybody that's not heard that joke before, I'm sorry.
I have. It's a good, but it's still a good one.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked, about immersion. We've talked about group, one for the road. I see, on your IMDb, you've got some other stuff that are coming up here. So what's coming up, and what are your further aspirations for making films down the road here? I know you've got a few things in process already.
Sure. Well, I mean, we produce some stuff for other people. So there's several short films by really talented people we produce. So it'll be coming out. A couple documentaries we've produced that, and I'm a very hands-off producer when it comes to, unless I'm asked. It's just, what do you need to get it done, and then back off. But for my own projects, the next one we're directing it's called Fetish. It's probably best if I don't discuss the plot. Fill in
Okay.
fill in the blanks. It's, what I will say, if you're a horror fan, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you watch it, and I
Mhm.
remember the first time I watched it, um, you swear you see things. Then you go back and you're like, oh, there's barely any you don't see anything. But my God, you feel like you do. And so Fetish is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre version of sex. That's, I guess, how the simplest way to say it is. You'll swear you
Okay.
see things, but I know you're not going to see what you think you
Gotcha.
saw. Um, there's a film called Encore, which is non-horror at all. It's about an old musician, played by a real musician, Don Scribner. He's going to be absolutely incredible in it. And yeah, don't want to give too much away about that. And then what I'm hoping to do, the one that takes the most funding, is a film called Sweetener, which is a home invasion film.
Ooh, okay.
And it starts pretty dark, takes a dark turn, and then my wife Zena, who produces all my stuff alongside me, she's the first one to read everything. She wouldn't talk to me for 15 minutes after the ending. She was so angry with me, and she's like, "This is a betrayal of an ending." And then after she thought about it, she goes, "All right, it's a pretty great ending." She's like, "I'm gonna read back to make sure this tracks." And then she did. She goes, "All right, it's really good." But that initial, that's what I want. That initial rage. I want to be in physical danger from the audience when that movie ends, and then have them think about it afterwards for a bit and decide not to kill me. So,
Gotcha. Those, you know what though, those are probably the best endings um, where it's a slow burn, where you're seeing something, you're expecting this to happen, and then you get that plot twist, and you're like, no, son of a, and then you're like, no, that was pretty good. Frick, yeah, he was right. He was right to do that. So I always like
yes.
those.
Yeah, and I know I recommended Funny Games. He did remake it. He made an English version, not a dubbed version. They were insisting on doing it, so Haneke said, "I'm going to do it shot for shot." There is a scene in it where something happens and you feel great, and then he takes that feeling away from you. Quite literally takes that feeling away. And I remember standing. I was just so pissed that he got me. And then, damn it, that was the best thing anyone could have possibly done in that film, and I will stand by it today. So and a bunch of stuff Lynch does too, where you're like, what the hell did he do? What was, how, why? And
Yeah.
love it. So
Yeah, I got to check it out. Funny Games. Funny Games. For anybody that's watching, we're all gonna watch Funny Games, and we're gonna start a whole a blog about it. There's gonna be like 72,000 blogs about Funny Games.
there should be. And by the way, that title is as big a lie as any lie ever told. I'm just throwing that out there right now. Disturbing as hell.
Great. That's good. Um, in your view, so this is something that as filmmakers, we're all trying to tell our stories. Um, you know, but that role that telling stories happens in society, and we're helping to kind of shape people's perspectives. what role do you feel that filmmaking really helps with society, and how are you hoping to contribute in making that impact?
Well, I think one of the roles is escapism, and I think that's achievable with, I think any movie that does its job will have that escapism. I don't particularly care for movies that are just designed as escapism.
Hmm.
Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah,
The Transformer, I don't know how many Transformers there are. I have no interest in watching any of them.
I don't know, probably like
Uh,
8.
yeah, you might be right. And so like for me, I want, I always say I make movies for grown-ups, for adults, and I don't want to hand feed them. I like to have I like it to be an escapism. I like it to be art, but I want people to be able to walk away with a different meaning for each of them, and have that be right. I don't want to spoon feed it. I don't want to tell them this is what this means and this is what you are to take away. No,
Hmm.
like two people can look at a painting or a picture, and or a picture of a cloud even, and come up with different meanings or different shapes for what that cloud is, and that's kind of what I want. Something that sucks you in, makes you think, and then makes you question yourself a little bit, and ideally I want them to want to watch again to
Hmm.
see if there are any other crumbs or Easter eggs, if there's anything to support what they thought, or if I cheat, which I don't cheat in my plots or writing or anything. But that's the thing. I want to make films that allow people to get engrossed enough that they want to check it out again. The same film, rewatchability, interest the first time, rewatchability, and I don't want them to see what's coming. That's the big
Definitely,
one. Not
definitely.
cheap twists, and I'm not naming any names. Not a twist for the sake of
M.
being a
Night
twist.
Shyamalan. What?
I didn't. Oh my God! I once this. I'll say this now. I was at a 76ers game years ago. We were sitting behind the bench. A friend had gotten us tickets, and they showed the famous people during a timeout, on the big screen, and they show M. Night Shyamalan. And I turned to my buddy and I go, "Should I go make him apologize for Lady in the Water?" And he just
Ah!
gives me this dude. My friend gives me the most you're the biggest idiot on earth look ever. And I turn, and 2 seats over, he heard everything. And I'm just like, I had to leave the game. I couldn't be in the same stadium anymore, man. It was terrible. So I felt very
Oh,
bad about that.
that's funny. Well, it's good that he felt bad, because after that, I think that's when he made the Avatar movie, and we don't need to talk about that because that was.
That's true. The funny thing is, the pagoda from that scene, that actual pagoda overlooks. It's on the top of the mountain, overlooking the house I'm at right now. So
Oh,
I,
geez.
I have to be reminded of it every every day.
You have my sincere apology. Um, Last question here, and we'll also talk about your social media and where we can watch your films. But you're still exploring the question of who William R.A. Rush is. How's your journey as a filmmaker helped you discover the answer to that question, or is that even just still an ongoing question that you're trying to answer?
I think it's an ongoing question I'm trying to answer, but I will say that, you spend so much time and work and money to pursue a career, and you pursue it for 20 years and you're empty. Um, and doing this, I'm not empty. I love it. I love being around the people. Um, my favorite place in the world, other than you know hanging out with my wife and daughters just doing nothing, is film set, and that's home. And I think anytime you're pursuing something as a craft or a job, especially if you're privileged enough to do so, and you feel at like you're home and there's no place you'd rather be than doing that, even when the most challenging times, even 20-hour days, that's magical. So I would say that um I as I love the process of writing, being truly home, being with myself, that creative process, but I love being on set and watching it come to life with the collaboration of dozens of other people. So I think ultimately that's what I want to be as a creator, and as far as if I could make the same living in film that I do as an attorney, I would take it in a heartbeat, and I'd be content as could be.
I think we're all probably in that boat. Anybody that's not there, they all want to be there someday, and I think that's all one of our goals. So appreciate you sharing that. Social media, let's talk about where people can find you. I found you on Instagram, Original Cinematic.
That's us at Original Cinematic.
And then we've got your website, ogcinpro.com. Is that correct?
Yep, OG Cin Pro, Original Cinematic.
All right. Where else can people find you, or where can we watch your films?
You can watch, well, One for the Road, as you know, Stephen King writes. So I can't say where you can watch that, but it's been somehow illegally pirated and is being streamed all over the place. I don't know how or why, but I have no authority to send a C&D, so that's where it is. Immersion, we're talking distributors now. It's obviously a year of Fine Festival, and several others. And group is at, you can go to Counterspell Distribution. It's there for sale or rent now. If you buy or rent it now, there'll be a screening party, I think on September 11th, where I'll join and have a live discussion the whole time. We'll be giving out props and stuff from the movie and scripts and things like that for group. So Counterspell Production, or Counterspell Distribution, and they're on Instagram as well. Probably have a Facebook, don't know what it is, and don't have a Twitter or X because because
No worries there. All right, well, perfect. So William R.A. Rush, Original Cinematic, ogcinpro.com, and Counterspell Distribution will be getting out the film so we can watch it for sale and rent as well. So producer, writer, director, William R.A. Rush, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Easy. It was great to be here.
Thanks, Bill.